Hello, I'm Mark, and this is the Fast Track Impact podcast for researchers who want to be more productive and achieve real-world impacts from their research. Well, I hope you all had a very enjoyable Easter holiday. I've had a bit of a hiatus on the podcast, taking some time out myself. I thought, actually, as I come back, it's worth updating you on a few developments, actually, that have been going on in Fast Track Impact that you may find useful. So we launched a couple of months ago now, and I never told you, I'm sorry, a Pathway to Impact Builder. So this is an online tool. If you just go to our resources page, that's probably the easiest way to find it. And you basically answer 10 questions in about 30 minutes. That's all it takes. And then your questions then get stitched together in a relevant order and spewed out the other side as a Word document that is structured as a impact summary and a pathway to impact. So that's the structure that you typically have to use in a UK grant application. But I would argue that stick those two things together, and whatever funder you're applying to, you've got all the stuff that you need. This is, of course, a first draft, but it's a Word document, so you can just directly go in then and start editing it. And the idea is that I'm trying to build capacity for good practice. Of course, I've come with some criticism here. I'm making life far too easy for academics. It's a one-size-fits-all approach, etc., and it's not. These are questions, so everyone will have different answers to the question. Every single one of these things will be unique. And actually, these questions have been developed based on the theory and practice of what works. I've trialled it quite extensively. And so the idea is what little time you do spend. There's a bit of a theme repeating here through this podcast and everything I do, if you've not noticed. Whatever little time you do have, maybe half an hour, well, great. Now I've got something which is actually a really good first start. And yeah, even if you submit it as it is in that 30 minutes, you'll get acceptable, I would argue. But of course, let's aim for excellent and do something really good with this. So try it out. It really does work, and it will save you some time and help you raise your game. Of course, don't forget, linked to that, you can see my best practice library of examples of pathways to impact, mainly from UK funders and European. But if you've got an example of a pathway to impact or whatever impact sections of whatever grant in whatever country you're in, let me know. I'd love to see it and review it. And if I agree it's an example of good practice, I'll stick it in the library. So, of course, it goes without saying, this is not for copying. This is for inspiration and spreading good practice and innovation across the sector. Do check that out. I've also started a vlog in addition to my podcast. So approximately once a week. I'm aiming for once a week. We'll see how we get on. I've pretty much managed so far. I'm putting out a video between 5 and 10 minutes. And the emphasis here is tips, practical things that can help you do impact more efficiently and effectively. So the first two are the techniques that I use all the time to fix problems with either significance or reach in my impact. So I've got something pretty far-reaching, but nobody cares. Or I've got something amazing for one company, one community, whatever. How can I now get some reach for this? And then the last two that I've done have been on evidence. So the most recent one was on how to evaluate your impact without annoying people with questionnaires. So getting quite creative. So check that out. They've got under publications now. You can see vlog and you can see all of them. And then one final thing to update you on is the Unsung Impact Prize. So if you remember, I think it was December I last talked to you about this. I launched a prize and we got our entries in. We evaluated them. We have chosen a winner. So we will be announcing this winner with the next issue of the Fast Track Impact magazine. So this is one of those projects that it's a good thing to do, but I never quite managed to find time to publish it on time. And we're so far only, 4 months, almost 5 months late. The goal is within the month we will have the next issue of the Fast Track Impact magazine, and in that I will be announcing the winner of the Unsung Impacts Prize. So I think really important just to think about the kind of impacts that inspire us, that are morally the right thing to do, that are hugely important and yet are unlikely to ever get rewarded in the academy, in research evaluation exercises and the like. So that thing that benefited one person, but it changed their lives, or changed the world, but we can't completely prove that it was all us that was behind it, for example. So lots of great and inspiring stories, and you can read about that in the magazine. And I'll do a podcast episode about it as well, so you can find out more about the entrance and be inspired as well. So this week, I want to dive into creativity, and I'm going to look at this at two levels. I'm going to look primarily at this from a professional perspective, but I'm going to also look at this from a personal perspective and what we can bring personally to our creativity. Essentially, this is about finding creativity in dark places, in the places that you wouldn't normally look, and the suggestion that actually when you look in those dark, challenging places, that you often find a deeper well of creativity than you do if you just go with the more playful approaches to generating creativity. Not that there's anything wrong with them. And the other idea here that I want to get across, it's not just where you look for creativity, but whether or not you're able to pair that creativity with enough determination to actually make your good ideas genuinely creative. So in academia, you hit lots of barriers, which means that actually the creative process is not that straightforward. If only being an academic was as easy as just coming up with good ideas, wouldn't that be wonderful? The problem is, no matter how creative and original this idea is, you have to now overcome multiple barriers in the review process. Multiple barriers in terms of, well, I did the experiment, it didn't work. Well, let's come up with a new hypothesis and let's keep going, pick myself up, and on we go. The creative spark is still there. I haven't quite given up on this idea yet. And the same goes with impact. So whatever you're trying to achieve, you can have an amazing idea, and so I've had a few of these. And actually, it's the small proportion of the creative ideas I've had that I've actually pursued all the way through that ultimately had any value, because actually they came out of my mind through my research and actually entered the world as a thing that benefited someone. So yeah, let's be creative, and that's part of the process. But let's make sure we pair this with enough determination to actually create something that is of value and that is artful. And so I hope what you're beginning to see now is that where I'm going with this, which is that actually it is the challenge. Whether it's a peer review process, the barriers on our pathway to impact that very often are part and parcel of the creative process, but they're not just simply obstacles to overcome. If instead of simply trying to ignore, get around, defend against, we embrace and look at those challenges and our limitations in the face of those challenges, then we actually enable those barriers to inform what we do, shape what we do, and very often we find that the outcome is way more creative and has way more value and is way more relevant than it would have been if this had all been plain sailing without any challenge. So we're looking at adversity as our friend here, looking into the darkness, taking leaps of faith into the unknown to discover our creativity and discover sources of creativity that we would never have found had we not taken those leaps into the darkness. So yeah, I think most of the great art that you see in the world is, at least in terms of the stories I've heard, but very often it's born of adversity. And some of the most creative research has come out of significant personal or professional sacrifice. people who've had to jump over multiple hurdles to eventually reach publication or impact. And very often, if it were not for that adversity, then the ultimate insight or benefit may not have been as profound or as useful. I certainly know some of the papers that I'm proudest of in terms of creativity are the ones that went through the most torturous peer review processes. And at the end of the day, generally speaking, those torturous papers, I look at the first draft compared to the last draft, and I'm like, wow, I'm so pleased that I didn't ever publish it in its original form. And it's the same, of course, with impact. So rather than seeing these barriers as problems, let's see if we can reframe them as part of the creative process and see how that then spurs us to greater creativity and enables us to extract even more value in the end. So I want to think now about personal adversity, limitation, challenge, and whether we can put that into the mix as well. Because for many of us professionally, what achievements we do have are actually against the backdrop of various natural disadvantages, whether that is that English is not my first language, whether it's that I'm dyslexic, or whatever else that we have in the mix there that means that, yeah, this is harder for me than for other people. I don't get any allowances for this stuff, but yeah, I overcome this stuff day to day just to actually do the stuff that everyone else, I figure, finds a lot more easily than me. And here I've been learning over Easter from a course in, it's a philosopher come theologist, I guess. So the course is called Atheism for Lent. So if you're interested in it, it's Pete Rawlins, W-A... Just Google Atheism for Lent. There's only one of them out there, and you can have a look at this. Challenging. Oh, that's my window shutting. Sorry. I'll shut that properly. There we go. Challenging on a fairly deep level, especially if you have a pre-existing faith. But the idea is that you look into the darkness, you look into the possibility that there is nothing, to the point that you fully believe that and engage with all of the philosophical arguments for why there is nothing. And you see what you find there. And this is about lowering your defences, stopping just making up excuses and defending and avoiding those existential questions, but actually looking them in the face and seeing actually if there is a place of deeper authenticity that feels more real to you. And you become more deeply yourself, or perhaps there's some other form of faith that lies beyond that wordless, empty space. And I think for me, what that has enabled me to do is just to think on a more personal level about how the creativity that I express through my research and what I do in Fast Track Impact is in fact born of my personal circumstances. And what I noticed as I kind of looked through it is that there are these pairs of things that kind of go together that you can't separate. The fact that light and day follows night, and actually you wouldn't be able to delineate day or appreciate the light if it were not for the darkness of the light. The fact that I feel on top of the world right now, I only appreciate how good it feels to be on top of the world in this moment, in contrast to the knowledge of what it feels like to be at the depths of sorrow and depression. And for me, two particular pairs, which this podcast episode was born of, were the idea that my anger was transformed into determination, and that my sorrow was transformed into hope and creativity. And actually, for me, one of the most interesting parts of what I learned in this course was that this was beyond transforming, and that actually that isn't the goal, because the idea that I transform, I change my anger into determination, that I replace my sorrow with hope and creativity is actually fundamentally unlikely to be sustainable, and actually psychologically unhealthy. It's actually about holding on to that anger and that sorrow and accepting that, yeah, there are things that have happened to me that make me angry, and that are a source of sorrow on a day-to-day basis. And I own that and I accept that. And with the other hand, I also hold the pair that goes with that, and the knowledge that actually from that that anger, there is a steely determination that I have that has enabled me over the years to just get my head down and keep going. That sense of injustice that has enabled me to say, you know what, almost no matter what the price, I keep going because I fight for the justice to make things right. And I certainly noticed that there have been times in my life where everyone else has fallen by the wayside and said, yeah, it's too much effort, it's too high risk, I'm not prepared to do that. And I carry on, I take that risk. And of course, as a risk taker, it doesn't always work out. But I see that difference as actually being something that is born of this deep well of anger I have at the injustices that I've experienced in my personal life. And I think that for me, that is a really positive reframing. And when you pair that then with the fact that I have a huge well of sorrow in my life as well, as most of us, I would argue, have, if you've lost something, and we've all lost something, and you're open and you're honest about what that loss genuinely means to you, then actually what I see is I hold that sorrow in my hand, and in this case this is the loss of my brother. He's still alive, which of course makes it even more painful. There is a heart-wrenching sorrow that I have on a day-to-day basis that I don't know where he is. I don't know if he's safe. I don't know what might be happening to him. And as my children grow up, with each and every new development, there is at some point a pang of sorrow that he's not getting to enjoy that and to be part of that, given how important our children were to him before we lost contact with him. But as I hold that sorrow and accept that I'm going to have that sense of sorrow, I'm going to have that sense of justice leading to injustice, leading to anger. There is then this sense of hope that I have, because actually I believe that this person cannot physically continue to prevent him from accessing us and us from accessing him in perpetuity. I don't know whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, but this cannot be forever. And so there is that sense of hope that one day we will be back in touch, and a belief that it will be like that it was just a bad dream, a blink of the eyelid, and we go back to being how we always were together as brothers. And you know, that idea of hope, if you look at the psychological literature, it is so central to a human's sense of purpose and meaning, and the belief that life is worth living, that it is worth continuing putting one foot in front of the other, no matter what your circumstances are. And I realise that actually I have a deeper source, a deeper well of hope, because I have to have a source of hope that is very, very deep in order to counter the sorrow and be able to hold that sorrow without it consuming me. And then from that sense of hope that I have, for me there is I can only speak of this metaphorically, but for me, as I hold that hope there, it feels like it's like a flower. And I hold this hope in my hand, and it's like a flower that is budding and is opening to light. And And as I go into the world with that steely determination born of injustice and anger to do what I can to make the world a better place, I think that I could potentially become a very hard person who seeks justice no matter what. Whoever gets in my way, I will batter them down because I am going to achieve justice, because actually this is a reaction against a whole load of unconscious things that is actually not tempered by anything. And for me, the fact that this is held with this sense of hope means that as I pursue these research processes to impact, and I have the determination to pursue them all the way to benefit, to make the world that better place, from that well of hope comes this flowering of creativity that says, hey, it hasn't worked this time. There is hope that this can work if we try again. There is not just that steely determination, we will make this happen no matter what, but a flowering of hope that says, let's just hold on here. Let's just reflect. Let's just wait. Maybe the time is not yet. And let's just see where this goes as we hold that sense of failure and the frustration that things didn't work with that sense of hope that it might work if we just wait until the right idea strikes. Instead of just forcing through and being impatient with this, there is this then patient calm that comes from that hope that I experience as creativity with determination, so that I actually then achieve the things that I want to do. And so I want to get you to think about this. I'm going to get you to think about this personally, but also professionally. What might be some of those things that you would pair together? What might be the opposite of, or the complement to, or the flower that buds from that dark soil that is where you feel that pain, that suffering, that experience that holds you back, and that is a limitation. And can you hold those negatives, those limitations, those challenges, and accept them and own them as authentically you, without having to necessarily transform them into anything good? They are there. They hurt. They limit you, and that's just part of who you are. But to say, yeah, that's part of who I am and I value that. And actually, in some respects, because of those things, I have these things which are positive, that are born of that, and that are uniquely me, and that enable me to be more creative and to achieve things that I would otherwise not be able to achieve in my professional or in my personal life. So what are those things on a personal level? And then finally, I want to have a think about this on a more professional level, just kind of focus this back in on how can you be a more creative researcher by pairing determination with creativity, and by looking on purpose at the darkness, at your limitations, at the uncertainty, at the unknown. And so I just basically thought, well, what are all the different ways that I have found enable me to be creative? So practical things that I've tried, philosophical things that I've tried, and which of these are actually about looking into the darkness to find creativity? And actually, the majority of them, in some shape or form, have this dynamic as part of them. And as I re-looked at the methods that I use day to day to become more creative, I realised that there is this deeper source of creativity, and there's a reason, perhaps, why these things work. So I've got, how many have I got? 4, 5 of these ideas, I think. So the first, as an idea, a way of becoming more creative on purpose, is to find the kind of places or spaces you need to think creatively. So this is a very common one. And I think most academics are familiar with the idea that I need not just time to think, I need to create the right environment to think. So for some of us, it's about sitting in your office, tidy, with a nice cup of coffee, whatever it is. Maybe it's going for a walk, maybe it's debate, but whatever it is, you need to create those spaces for creativity to flourish. Great. But what I've discovered actually is that that actually, in the same way that day is carved from night, actually you create these creative spaces by carving them out from the uncreative space that surrounds them, which is full of deadlines, of chatter, of unrealistic expectations, fear, or imposter syndrome, all of these other things. And so there is this deeper space that you begin to create when you realize, well, for me, my creative space, and ask yourself, what is it? What is it? Is it that walk? Is it my study? Actually, what is it that I have carved that out from, and what is the negative reverse of that creative space? Because if you understand that, then you can actually carve out a much deeper creative space that is actually way, way more creative. And so for me, this is about creating a space that is free from the pressure of deadlines, the fear of going wrong, and imposter syndrome. And so if I haven't dealt with that, then I can do all that I want physically to create that time, and I'm in the right place in the world to create that space. And as I sit there are these jabbing thoughts of, oh my goodness, I haven't done that, and oh, I've only got this amount of time to finish it, the pressure of deadlines, and then the voice of the reviewer on my shoulder, imposter syndrome, and great idea, but that would never work. And I start editing those thoughts before I even put pen to paper. And actually, you know what? It was a waste of space. It was a waste of time. I thought I created that creative space, but it didn't work. Why didn't it work? Well, actually, it's because it's not just about going for a walk or creating a nice office. It's actually about something a bit deeper. So ask what is the opposite of your creative space, and think about how you can now look into that negative opposite space, and in so doing, create a space in which you can think even more creatively. So I'm now facing the causes of my imposter syndrome. I'm dealing with why I feel so nervous about this, why I feel like I'm going to fail, why this might never work. Who it is that I'm trying to please, who is judging me somehow on some subconscious level. And I'm dealing with that before I go into my creative space. And as a result, there are no jabbing feelings of imposter syndrome, and I do that creative thinking. I'm sitting down and I'm looking at my deadlines, I'm looking at my diary, and I'm saying, right, I've got all those things to do. That's when I'm going to do them. And I'm protecting this space, and this will not in any way impinge on my ability to do those deadlines. I stop worrying about the deadlines, and I sit and I think. Great. So as part of that, I think that for me, one of the biggest blocks to creativity is that internal critic. And so for me, this is about, again, looking at the darkness rather than just trying to ignore the fact that there is this inner critic in some dark place within myself, and trying to create a light, nice environment for myself. I'm looking at who is that critic. Ultimately, what is that internal conversation I'm having with myself? Can I actually verbalize that and put that into words and write that down? Hold on, that is crazy. That is stupid. Do I actually think that? No. And ultimately, well, who is the person sitting behind that critic? Is it my overbearing father? Is it my violin teacher who destroyed my confidence in grade 11 or whatever it is? And actually understand now, as I look in those dark places, that there are reasons why I never have the confidence of my convictions to actually pursue that thought to the end, maybe I managed to get enough time and space to do some creative thinking, but I never actually put it into practice, and I never extract the value for that. And so, I've got creative ideas, but I'm never artful. I never actually create anything enough of value to really feel like this was ever satisfying. So look into that darkness to create those safe spaces. This one is a bit challenging as an academic, and this is the idea of diving into a space of illogicality and uncertainty and suspending reason in order to become more creative, and so. As an academic, you think, well, I need to build on theory. I need to look at what methods are available to me. I'm building on my literature review. That's where I start. And there's a formula that you go through as a researcher to build on the shoulders of giants, so to speak. And as a result of that formula, it's actually really hard to be creative because as you read, you discover actually that everyone's had lots of great ideas and there's no room for any more new ideas. And you do something kind of incremental that kind of tweaks at the edges of things and is not genuinely original and groundbreaking. And so the suggestion here is to jump off that cliff edge into a space where you suspend logic and reason, and there are lots of methods that can do this. So the most common example of this as a method would be brainstorming. I like doing this in a group setting. It's the most creative, but just doing it by yourself. So I'm now purposefully not thinking through what I'm saying and trying now as much through the process of word association as through anything else, just to say, well, what about this and now this idea, and we could do this, and let's try that, and you keep that energy going. And there's a load of stuff there that is complete rubbish, but every now and then there is this insight that is, wow, yeah, that is something quite special. And just to think about this in a different way, one of the things that I like to do, which I admit goes against the advice I give to my PhD students on a regular basis. I should maybe revise my feedback actually. But what I do when I want to come up with something really original in my research is that I take it for granted that I've got a basic understanding of the thing. Well, it's something within my research area. So there's this kind of basic level of knowledge, which is probably why, as a PhD student, you do need to start with your literature review. But let's just leave that foundation untouched. But let's assume you've got a kind of a fairly good general knowledge of your discipline, the area that you're trying to work in, and now you're hitting up against this particular challenge. Right, I want to do some creative thinking on this. And so what I do is I start by purposefully resisting the urge of my rationality and my training to go to the literature and read and do that methodical thing that we usually do as researchers to find out, right, what has been tried, what hasn't worked, what have we learned from that, and how do I then build on everything we currently know about how we might be able to address this particular challenge. Instead, I start with that blank sheet of paper and I wait until I can come up with as many ideas as I can. Now, there's a whole load of things I don't know, and I'm still, as I go through these, I get more and more tempted to go to the literature. Well, this sounds a bit naive, but if time was limitless, if resources were unlimited as well, then what about if we were to just try doing something like this or that? And I'm aware that these are perhaps naive, but I'm not going to the literature. I'm just saying, well, yeah, and then you would try this, and then that would lead to the next thing, and there's one approach. Well, what else is there? And let's just wait again. And are there any other ideas that come out as I'm doing this? And very often it doesn't work, and you go to the literature and you discover, so I had 3 ideas. They were all tried in the 1970s and they all failed for good reason, and nobody solved this yet. But every now and then in the same way as with brainstorming, one of those ideas, because you did not constrain your mind with the constructs and limitations and theories of what everyone else has done, you hit upon something which is actually genuinely original. And now, okay, this looks like it might work. We've got a job to do here because there are some assumptions I've made here. It might be a bit naive at the edges. Well, let's see where this goes. And very often you come up with something which is much more radically different. And as a creative process, I would argue that is more likely to lead to radical innovation rather than incremental. Two more. This, I'm going to give you a health warning here. I do like everything to be evidence-based. I have not investigated the evidence base behind this particular one. I got it from a TED talk. So it could be worse, could be Wikipedia or somewhere else. But it was a TED talk. I can't even remember who it was now. It was ages ago, about procrastination. And the suggestion is that more people who procrastinate more are more creative. Interesting idea. And what I'm suggesting here is, again, that we look into the dark face of procrastination. We've all looked at this many times before, and it's not a pretty sight. Well, it actually depends on your chosen method of procrastination. It might be actually quite attractive, to be honest. But I'm looking at procrastination here, and I'm seeing procrastination as my friend. And what this particular gentleman suggests is that there is a way of harnessing procrastination to enable you to be more creative. And so it's not just simplistically people who procrastinate are more creative. There is one condition here, which is that you're given a task and you pop that into a back room of your mind, onto a back burner, so to speak. I've been given this task, I've got this challenge, I need to find a way of solving this at some point. Maybe you've got a deadline associated with this, and maybe it's a few months in advance. What this guy does is he presents some research, and I do not know how rigorous this is, but he puts this research up on a screen and draws some graphs with it. And the reason I'm not worried about the rigor of this is that philosophically this makes sense, and there's something quite practical and useful that I think experientially works. So just bear with me here. So the person who gets the task and says, right, I've got to do it, so I might as well do it now while it's fresh in my mind. Here we go. And I've got 3 months to do it, but by the end of the week, here you go, job done. I've written my report, paper, whatever it is. Maybe not a paper in the week, who knows? and great, job done. By contrast, the procrastinator, if you have stuck that into that back room, onto that back burner, and you're just mulling it over in your subconscious, then what happens is over those 3 months now, you start putting 2 and 2 together and realise, I was going to write it along these kind of lines. That seems the obvious way to do this, but I've just, in my case, gone on a course about atheism, and I've just put together a whole load of dots that has turned a podcast about creativity into something much deeper than I thought it was going to be, because I held on to this, and I've been working these ideas for a few weeks now. And you start seeing all these new opportunities and thinking about it in different ways. And when you actually come to write this, you write something which is much more creative than the obvious answer that you would have gone to if you had just attacked it instantly. There is one other thing that happens. This is something that I wrote about in The Productive Researcher, which is he talks about in his TED talk, but for me is something that I've experienced as well, which is the procrastinator then ends up with a problem of a deadline because the deadline is tomorrow and actually I've left this to the last minute. But again, this is not a universal thing, so there are some assumptions I'm making here. If I leave myself an hour to write an entire paper, I am going to write complete rubbish. This is not going to go well for me. So I'm leaving myself enough time, but now I've left myself usually a slightly uncomfortable amount of time. So I've got now 1 day to write this short report. And yeah, I would have quite liked longer than this, but I've got a day. And now what I do is, this is now so urgent, I have no choice that I clear my diary, I turn off my email, I focus. And actually, I spend probably the same amount of time that the person who wrote it in a week to start with spent, and they spread that time over different days at different times, and it was quite bitty. But I'm now doing this, having done some quite deep thinking over these 3 months. And I'm doing it in a day, and I'm doing some really focused work, and I'm shutting everything else out. And actually, that time that I write in is actually higher quality thinking time, writing time, and I actually produce something higher quality and more creative as a result of my procrastination. So rather than running away from it, rather than trying to defend against it, beating myself up against it, maybe I could look at procrastination in the face and actually find something good from that. Hey, that's just me. I seem to never learn that lesson. So let's just embrace that part of who I am and say, with some good management, I'm putting this into a back room of my mind and making sure I do organise my time to have enough time. Actually, maybe I turn this into a strength. Last one here is limitations, and this is a well-known way of stimulating creativity. One of the reasons why Twitter worked and gained traction. Can I say it in this number of characters? And why they've been so nervous about ever increasing that. Haiku as a form of poetry, 5 syllables in the first, then 7, and 5 syllables in the last line, 3 lines of poetry. And it's incredible. You try it yourself, and this is not going to be an incredible work of art, but you can get some really quite creative stuff coming out that has beauty, and it's because of that limitation, a word limit in a paper. That forces you to take a different approach to what would feel comfortable or easy. And of course, it is again that tension, that opposite. It is the constraint that forces you to face your limitations that actually stimulates the creativity. So this. Let me give you one more brief one. So it kind of comes back to some of the stuff on your critics. I recently had an experience of supervising a PhD student who was actually quite deeply critical of my own work. And so this could have been a challenging supervisory relationship, but I chose to take this as an opportunity to learn. And so he was coming from a very different disciplinary background. He was an applied anthropologist. And he made a fairly deep critique of some of my work on participation, where I had claimed that actually, yeah, context matters, but there are certain design principles that if you get these small things right and avoid those particular things, then pretty much independent of context, you can make participation work and deliver outcomes for the people and environment that you're working with that work for people. And of course, as an anthropologist, he was instantly skeptical of this and pointed out to me all of the reasons why, in fact, context is so important and why I need to have a dual focus on design and context at the same time. And so at the end of this, we have a PhD thesis and in theory, some papers at a certain point, not yet. That are going to be critical of my former published work, and I'm going to be co-authoring those papers. And I thought I'd just add this in as a challenge in terms of looking at your critics. I think that so often as academics, it's so easy to just go into my disciplinary silo, all the other people who think like me and who will give me a pat on the back and say, don't worry, it's all right, we believe you, and to defend against the critics of my work, rather than to actually look my critics in the eye and say, you know what, maybe there's something that I could learn from you. And could you actually see the situation of publishing a paper that demolishes one of your own former papers and explains why, in fact, you might have been wrong? I've not yet done it, but that is the plan. And I think it's a challenging plan, and it certainly challenges me. It requires a level of humility, but it's a worked example of the joy of actually delving into the depths of what is dark, what is challenging, what is uncertain, what is uncomfortable, to harness that rather than just have to defend against it. So that is it. In conclusion, this is how to be more creative by valuing the tensions that we find between our creativity and our limitations, our critics, the things that go wrong, the things that ultimately might defeat our attempts at creativity. That when we actually look into that darkness and are determined enough to keep going, we can harness the things that we find in those dark places to be more creative than ever before and to generate outcomes from our creativity that have more value than ever before for us, for our disciplines, and for the people who might benefit from our research.